All right, welcome back to the lectures. We are going to talk now about Chapter 7, the Early Republic, and we're going to start here with the introduction. So, Thomas Jefferson's electoral victory over John Adams, and really the larger victory of the Republicans over the Federalists, was but one of many changes in the early Republic. Some, like Jefferson's victory, were accomplished peacefully, others kind of violently. The wealth and the powerful, the middling and poor whites, the Native Americans, free and enslaved African Americans, influential and poor women, all of these people are going to demand a new voice in the nation. And this nation is one that Thomas Paine comes and says, hey, is an asylum for liberty. But all of these people in their own way would lay claim to the freedom and the equality that was promised and not really ever fully realized by the revolution. So then we're going to talk here about the free and enslaved black Americans and their challenge to slavery that's going to start taking place. Now, led by a slave named Gabriel, close to 1,000 enslaved men planned to end slavery in Virginia by attacking Richmond in late August 1800. Some of the conspirators would set diversionary fires in the city's warehouse district, and then others would attack Richmond's white residents, seize weapons, and then go on to try and capture Virginia Governor James Monroe. And so that's the plan. Now, for quiz and test purposes, you need to know what went wrong. Well, on August 30th, there was 2 enslaved men who actually go and reveal this plot to their master. And their master then notifies authorities. So people now know about it. Well, a bad storm comes in, and Gabriel and the other leaders of this revolt postponed the attack until the next night. Well, because the plan had been revealed, Governor Monroe has time to get a militia together. They capture the conspirators, and after briefly escaping, Gabriel himself is seized and tried and hanged along with 25 others. Their executions really send a message that others would be punished if they challenged slavery. Subsequently, also, the Virginia government increases restrictions on the free people of color there as well. Now, Gabriel's rebellion, as it kind of came to be known, taught Virginia's white residents several lessons. First, it suggested that black enslaved people were capable of preparing and carrying out a very sophisticated and violent revolution. And this undermined some of the white supremacist assumptions about the inherent intellectual inferiority of blacks. Furthermore, it demonstrated that white efforts to suppress news of other slave revolts, especially the 1791 slave rebellion in Haiti, had utterly failed. Not only did some literate slaves read about these other revolutions and revolts in the Virginia newspapers, others had actually heard about the rebellion firsthand when, believe it or not, slave-holding refugees from Haiti who had escaped actually show up in Virginia with their slaves after July of 1793. And you need to know that for quiz purposes, that one of the results of the Haiti Revolution is some of these people actually end up in Virginia with their slaves. Now, the Haiti Revolution inspired free and enslaved black Americans, and it really terrified white Americans. Port cities in the United States were flooded with news and refugees. Free people of color embraced the revolution, understanding it as a call for basically full abolition and the rights of citizenship that were being denied in the United States. Over the next several decades, black Americans continually looked at Haiti as inspiration in their struggle for freedom. For example, 1829, David Walker, who was a black abolitionist in Boston, wrote an appeal that called for resistance to slavery and racism. Walker called Haiti the glory of the blacks and terror of tyrants, and said that Haitians, according to their word, are bound to protect and comfort us. Right? Because Haiti also proved that given equal opportunities, people of color could achieve as much as whites could. In 1826, the third college graduate of color in the United States, John Russwurm, gave a commencement address at Bowdoin College, noting that Haitians have adopted the Republican form of government, and in no country are the rights and privileges of citizens and foreigners more respected and crimes less frequent. Talking about Haiti. In 1838, the Colored American, an early black newspaper, professed, "No one who reads with an unprejudiced mind the history of Haiti can doubt the capacity of colored men nor the propriety of removing all their disabilities." So basically, Haiti and the activism that it inspired really sends a message that enslaved and free blacks could not be omitted from these conversations about the meaning of liberty and equality anymore. Their words and their actions on plantations and streets and in print left a really indelible mark on the national political culture of the United States. Black activism, also inspired by Haiti's revolution, was so powerful that anxious white leaders scrambled to use the violence of the Haitian Revolution to basically reinforce white supremacy and pro-slavery views by limiting social and political lives of people of color. White publications mocked Black Americans as buffoons, ridiculing calls for abolition and equal rights. The most infamous of these was the Bobolition broadsides, which was published in Boston in 1810s, crudely characterized the African Americans. It was widely distributed, and things like these became the basis for racist ideas that really thrive during the 18th century. But if you're being honest, the ridicule and the such powerful ridicule also kind of implied that Black Americans' presence in the political conversation was significant enough to actually require trying to dismiss it. The need to reinforce such an obvious difference between whiteness and blackness really implied that the differences might not be so obvious after all. Then you have Henry Moss, who was a slave in Virginia. He becomes very famous because he's a Black man, and all of a sudden, white spots start to show up on his body in 1792, turning him visibly white within like 3 years. So his skin changes. Moss marketed himself as a great curiosity throughout Philadelphia, and soon he earns enough money to buy his freedom. Now, he met great scientists of the era, Samuel Stanhope Smith and Dr. Benjamin Rush, who joyously deemed Moss to be living proof of their theory that the black color of the Negro is derived from leprosy. Something somehow was cursing Moss of his blackness, right? In the whitening body of a slave turned patriot turned curiosity, many Americans really start to foster these ideas that race would cause major problems in the years ahead. And then you have the first decades of the new American Republic coinciding with a very radical shift in the understanding of race. Political and cultural Enlightenment thinking fostered beliefs in common humanity, right? The possibility of societal progress, the remaking of oneself, the importance of one's social and ecological environment. And they said that this is the four-pronged revolt against the hierarchies of the old world. Yet a tension arose during the Enlightenment thinkers' desire to classify and order the natural world. Carolus Linnaeus, Comte de Buffon, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, and others really create connections between race and place as they divide the racial types of the world according to skin color, cranial measurements, and hair. They claim that years under the hot sun and tropical climate of Africa had darkened the skin and reconfigured the skulls of the African race, whereas the cold northern latitudes of Europe had molded and sustained the Caucasian race, which is ridiculous. The environments endowed both races with respective characteristics, which accounted for differences in humankind tracing back to common ancestry. A universal human nature, therefore, housed not fundamental differences, but rather the idea of environment creating a civilized or primitive people, which were basically two poles on the social scale. Now, informed by European anthropology and Republican optimism, Americans really confront their own uniquely problematic racial landscape. In 1787, Samuel Stanhope Smith published his treatise, Essay on the Causes of Variety of Complexion and Figures in the Human Species, which further articulated the theory of racial change and suggested that improving social environment would tap into the innate equality of humankind and drastically uplift non-white races. The proper society he and others believed could gradually whiten men the way nature spontaneously chose to whiten Henry Moss. They thought that if you just, were more civilized, that nature would naturally make your skin lighter. These people are racists, straight up racists. Now you need to understand that for quiz and test purposes, Thomas Jefferson actually disagreed with this. Jefferson thought Native Americans could improve and become civilized. But he declared in his notes on the state of Virginia that black people were incapable of mental improvement and they might even have separate ancestry, which is a theory known as polygenesis or multiple creations. And now remember this, his belief in polygenesis was less to justify slavery because slaveholders universally reject the theory of polygenesis as anti-biblical and thus a threat to their primitive instrument of justification, which was the Bible. And he instead used it to justify schemes for a white America, such as the plan to gradually send freed slaves back to Africa to keep America white. Many Americans believed nature had made the white and black races too different to peacefully coexist, and they viewed African colonization as the only solution of America's racial problems. Jefferson's note on the state of Virginia also sparked considerable backlash from anti-slavery and black communities. The celebrated black surveyor Benjamin Banneker, for example, immediately wrote to Jefferson and demanded that he eradicate that train of absurd and false ideas and instead embrace the belief that we are all one flesh and with all the same sensations and endowed with the same faculties. Many years later, he writes The Appeal to Colored Citizens of the World, and David Walker channeled decades of black protests, simultaneously denouncing the moral rot of slavery and the racism while praising the inner strength of the race. Now, Jefferson had his defenders, right? The white men such as Charles Caldwell and Samuel George Morton really hardened Jefferson's skepticism with the biological case for blacks and whites, not only having separate creations, but also actually being from different species, which was a position increasingly articulated throughout the antebellum period. Few Americans actually subscribed wholesale to these theories, but many shared the beliefs in white supremacy. And as the decades go by, white Americans are forced to acknowledge that if the black population was indeed whitening, it was a result from interracial sex and breeding, not the environment. And the sense of inspiration and wonder that followed Henry Moss in the 1790s would have been impossible, just even a generation later. Okay? And that's going to bring us to the end of this section. Next, we'll pick up with the Jeffersonian Republicanism in section 3.